It's my privilege and honor to introduce our speaker for our first session. Our first session will be on biblical and theological understanding of pain, which will be led by Dr. Aravind Jeyakumar Moniraj. Dr. Aravind Jeyakumar serves as the assistant professor and head of the Department of Old Testament at Gurukul Lutheran Theological College, Chennai. Apart from Gurukul Theological College, Sir has also served as a lecturer of Old Testament at Indian Theological College, Chennai, and also at Leonard Theological College, Jabalpur. He has also many academic publications to his credit. He was instrumental in teaching and training many students who are now presently serving different churches and the society at large. Today, he'll be taking us through the first session, which is on biblical and theological understanding of pain. So we welcome you into our midst. We are happy to have you. Shall we all give a clap and welcome, sir? We look forward to listening from you. After the session, we'll also have a time of any questions or discussions. Over to you.
Good morning, friends. It is my great pleasure and privilege to be here, especially as Christian Medical College, Vellore. The Chaplaincy has organized a wonderful national symposium on pain, a pertinent theme which has to be discussed. And I congratulate the head of the Chaplaincy, Reverend Dr. Aruldas, who was also my teacher, and his team, and especially Reverend Devraj for organizing this and inviting me to be the speaker of this session, especially on addressing the topic, biblical and theological understanding of pain. A special word of thanks to Reverend Jim Paul for being instrumental in inviting me to this symposium. Friends, I have prepared a paper on this topic, so I'll be reading and explaining it, and then maybe later on we can have a few minutes for discussion. So as we know, pain is an integral part for any fragile, mortal creature, and there are many different kinds of pain, as we know, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and so on. Some people spend their entire lives seeking pleasure and trying to avoid pain. Others really believe that no pain, no gain, in a literal sense, and seek it out as a path to higher consciousness or transcendence. There are also people who, despite dealing with all kinds of ailments, was in denial about the reality of physical pain and suggested that pain was mainly a mental problem and the solution mind over matter. Or in other words, if you ignore it, or say it is not real, then you can get beyond it. So with this introduction, I would like to introduce this title, Biblical and Theological Understanding of Pain. And I have formulated my paper in the following way. And this is the brief outline of my paper. Towards defining pain, some of the terminological clarifications, pain-related terms both in the Old and New Testaments, and how Judeo-Christian traditions have understood pain. A brief overview and a comprehensive inquiry of the Judeo-Christian understanding of pain, and then finally, let us try to formulate a theology of pain, some of the practical implications from theological point of view or from pastoral concerns point of view. The International Association for the Study of Pain in 1979 defined pain as an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage, or described in terms of such damage. According to Medical Dictionary, pain is an uncomfortable feeling occurring as a result of disease or injury. Usually, it's localized in some parts of body. I'll skip that. And if we refer to Oxford English Dictionary, it defines pain as one when he or she feels hurt in body or mind, suffering that the opposite of pleasure, bodily suffering, mental suffering, and grief. Pain may be localized or generalized. It's complex sensations that causes mild to severe physical discomfort or emotional distress. Also, pain can be helpful in diagnosing a problem that needs treatment. The word pain is derived from the Latin word poena, as you know, meaning a penalty or punishment. It's an abstract concept which refers to a personal, individualized sensation of hurt. Also, pain acts as an important biological safety and defensive mechanism that warns people when something is wrong. It's a private, personal, subjective, and multi-dimensional experience. Pain intensity varies based on various psychological, physiological, social, and cultural factors, because pain is a private experience. It is impossible to know accurately and precisely what someone else feels like. And according to the North American Nursing Diagnosis Association, defined pain in which an individual experiences discomfort or uncomfortable sensation, the documenting and reporting of pain can be by verbal communication or encoded features. If we move on from these medical explanations, according to psychologists, pain is not just a physical aspect. It also can be emotional. Emotional pain results because of disappointment in expectations or relationships, needs to be acknowledged and deal with it. Failure to do that can result in emotional problems and serious mental issues and consequences. And when we look at this topic, pain, from a philosophical point of view, pain and related perception is influenced by several factors, and these factors are cognitive awareness, interpretation, behavioral dispositions, as well as cultural and educational factors. Pain has bodily, psychological, and socio-cultural dimensions. Pain has been defined as a process as a result of somatosensory reception, later on present in the brain as a mental image and followed by unpleasant feelings as well as changes in body. Pain is God's instrument, on the other hand, to produce strength, to learn, to grow, to improve. Pain is essential in order to avoid any bad behaviors. And of course, pain reminds persons that they need help and need a team, brings all people together because it is main part of everyone's story. That is no one immune. Pain could be a gift from the universe. It is a message that there is something wrong, and it has to be addressed, and so on. If we see pain from a Judeo-Christian perspective, pain is an experience that people live it, and the natural reaction to pain is to avoid it or to get rid of it, and the importance of the need to realize that God allows pain. In fact, suffering and pain is a sign of God's love. We will see a little about it later. And if we look at pain from an Islamic perspective, Allah has a purpose for your pain, a reason for your struggles, and a reward for your faithfulness. Don't give up. These are some of the definitions which are given for pain. And finally, if we see from an Eastern traditions point of view or from Indian point of view, we can take Buddhism as an example, where we have the Four Noble Truths, which says like this: pain, suffering, and dissatisfaction are part of a normal life. This suffering is called dukkha, according to Buddhism. So human nature is imperfect, as is the world we live in, which is also imperfect. During our lifetime, we inevitably have to endure physical suffering such as pain, sickness, injury, tiredness, old age, and eventually death. So this is an overall idea about how pain has been defined by different sections or by different perspectives, from the perspective of medicine and from the perspective of religion, from the perspective of philosophy, psychology, so on and so forth. There are different terms in the Old Testament and New Testaments where we can see that the word pain is used. That is, there are different Hebrew words and Greek words which are used, and those words are translated as pain, pangs, sorrow, so on and so forth. I would like to highlight some of the Old Testament and New Testament words which are used in order to understand how we can perceive these terms. In the Old Testament, if you see, there are several Hebrew words which are used to understand pain. Hul, kil, hevel, kala, kalakha, kaeb, keeb, mestar, makoa, amal, tsir. These are some of the words which are used in the Old Testament to denote pain. And if you see, more than 34 passages are using these different words, and especially only in the prophetic and in the poetic books. For example, as we know, the prophetic books from Isaiah to Malachi, and some of the poetic books like Psalms, Proverbs, and so on. In these books also we can see that this term pain has been used than in any other books of the Old Testament. There is only one instance where the word pain is used as a historic record or physical pain. That is in the case of the wife of Phinehas. We can see that in 1 Samuel chapter 4, verse 19. At the same time, the word tsir, T-S-I-R, has been figuratively used in Isaiah. So that means it is not plainly used, but it is also figuratively used, especially in the poetic and the prophetic texts. And in some places, these Hebrew words are not translated as pain, but they are translated as pangs or sorrows. And even the pain that one endures during giving birth to child, that is also mentioned in the Bible. Especially in the prophetic books, if we see the prophetic book of Jeremiah, he is called as one of the weeping prophets because he was weeping for what is going to happen to Jerusalem, to Judah, because people were not listening to his prophecy. So when people were committing sin, he said that you will face pain if you don't obey to God, and so on. And if we move on to the New Testament books, There are so many terms which are used, the Greek terms, to denote pain. For example, basanizo, ponos, and Odin. Especially this word Odin is translated as pain in the New Testament. This word is used to express any severe pain, okay, any intense pain. Okay. And there are also other words which are used to denote pain. So from this usage of words, we can understand that pain is part and parcel of the Bible. Whether in the Old Testament or New Testament, we don't see the absence of pain. Whether the prophets or the poetic books, wherever you can see, pain has been mentioned, but how it has been mentioned, how the Old Testament and New Testament have understood pain, and that is our task to trace out. So, in a nutshell, I would like to show in 2 slides like how the Judeo-Christian understanding of pain can be perceived. Okay. When I say Judeo-Christian tradition, we should understand that the Old Testament that we have is basically the Hebrew Bible. Because Jewish expressions are there in the Hebrew Bible, okay, which we are using as Old Testament. And that is why I am mentioning here as Judeo-Christian tradition. So in the Judeo-Christian traditions, the existence of pain is understood as a result of human fall. This is the basic understanding that Bible is giving. It gives birth in the human soul to an ingrained feeling of guilt that demands to be repaired and therefore is inclined to redemption. Why there is a need of redemption? Because of the fall of humankind. And when pain started? Because of the fall of humankind. And this is what Bible says. Because if we read in the Old Testament, God created everything. But you don't see that God created pain also. Because pain comes much later when the first couple was chased out of the Garden of Eden. In this vision, pain is seen as a punishment. So pain is seen as a punishment in the Old Testament, at the same time as a purifying agent. Because when you feel bad, when you feel guilty, it is a sort of pain which leads you to salvation or redemption. As such, it contributes to redemption and salvation. Pain is thus not constitutive of existence itself, but rather the guilt of existing and at the same time a means of redemption. If pain and suffering are the result of a fault inclined to redemption, this earth and our earthly existence are only transitory. This is the basic understanding of pain in the Christian or in the Jewish tradition. And moreover, the expected future soothes the cruelty of pain because those suffering today may be liberated tomorrow. Okay, so pain is not permanent, which is temporary, which is another emphasis that the Old Testament and the New Testament are trying to give. Pain is no longer something inevitable in life, but something that happened as the result of a fault and therefore fundamentally separable from life. That means true life does not know pain, and if life on earth is not exempt from pain, it's only because life on earth is not a real one, the one for which humankind was born. So this is where our Christian understanding of our life here on earth is expressed. That means we are going through pain because of the human sin, but then this world is not temporary, so we can escape from pain. This widely shared Christian interpretation often leads to a devaluation of earthly life. So often we have the understanding that we are not part and parcel of this earth. We are not part and parcel of this entire creation. And our life here is temporary because we are going to heaven. There is a life after death. So here we endure pain, we suffer, but in the life after that we will not suffer. So life is a valley of tears that, as Isaiah says, finds its justification only in the expectation of a new heaven and new earth. Pain then in both the elements that leads to devaluation of this world and most powerful factor that leads to hope and faith. So on the one hand, the Old Testament is trying to say that there is pain because of human fall, human sin, and we are enduring pain, we are experiencing pain because of the human sin, which is part and parcel of our life. But there is a possibility to overcome this pain because this life is temporary and there is a life after death where there will be no pain and so on and so forth. This is not my view, but this is the general understanding that we have from the Bible, from the Old Testament as well as from the New Testament, and also from the several interpretations that this is how pain is understood. So now, let us see how pain is understood by looking at different sections or from the quotations of the early church fathers, how they have understood pain. The word pain appears in the Bible several times, as we know, and this is where it was used for the first time. It cannot be seen in Genesis chapter 1 or 2 during the process of creation. And when they committed sin, God is telling to the woman, He said, I will greatly multiply your pain. This is the first time the word pain is appearing in the Bible. In childbirth, in pain you will bring forth children, yet your desire will be for your husband and he will rule over you. The context here is that Adam and Eve had sinned, and the pain of childbirth is the consequence of sin. So here it is underlined that pain is the consequence of sin. Because of sin, the whole earth was cursed and death entered as a result. So biblically, one can conclude that pain is one of the many results of original sin. According to the Jewish traditions, the book of Job is one of the typical examples to say how a righteous will also suffer. It doesn't matter whether a person is righteous or unrighteous, all under the sky will suffer. So the book of Job is precisely and entirely dedicated to the problem of why do righteous people suffer and undergo pain. It is called as a theodicy in the theological language. We know that according to the principle of retribution is nothing but God paying back immediately, whether good or bad, for all our deeds. In this world, good people should be blessed, whereas the wicked ones are to be severely punished for their sinful deeds. But if Job was righteous, why should he be invaded by all this tragedy in his suffering? Job protests with all his energy and his most cutting irony against the orthodox dogma of retribution personated by his three friends. Okay. So his friends were giving pressure on him, saying that you are suffering because of the sins that you have committed. Because that is the understanding that they had. And there are so many quotations we can see from the early church fathers who have also understood that pain is because of human sin. The Lord foretold to his disciples and followers that in the world, that is during their earthly life, they would have tribulation. From this, it is clear that pain and sorrow and suffering are appointed by Lord himself for his true slaves and servants during their life on earth. I would like to skip some sections. So, if you see the other references in the New Testament, pain is also presented in a positive way. Speaking spiritually, one of the benefits of pain is expressed by James in his epistle. Consider it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. According to James, when we endure painful trials, we can take joy in knowing that God is at work in us to produce endurance and Christ-like character. This applies to to the mental, emotional, spiritual pain, as well as to the physical pain. When we look at the biblical understanding of pain, it is more paradoxical in nature. On the one hand, it says that yes, pain is there because of human sin, but on the other hand, it says that pain is temporary. And it is good to endure pain. So which one to take? So we are living in a context where we see that people undergo pain due to various reasons. We have gathered here as medical professionals, pastors, theologians, and upcoming medical practitioners, and so on. How can we understand pain? Or how can we treat pain? Or how can we endure pain? Or how can we go along with pain? Is there any hope? And that is what I would like to formulate as theology of pain, towards a renewed theology of pain, embodied hope. From my reading from the Old Testament and New Testament, I would like to draw your attention to some of the passages where you can see that the presence of pain is there, but pain has been addressed. So I would like to take these passages as paradigm in order to motivate us from a theological or pastoral perspective to endure and overcome pain and help others in the process of overcoming pain. Number one, if you see, Yahweh identifies himself with the people who are in pain. The famous passage is from Exodus. We all know that Exodus narrative is about liberation of the people of Israel from the bondage of Egypt. We all know that God liberated them through Moses' leadership, through the plagues. They crossed the Red Sea, and so on and so forth. But we don't try to read some of the initial chapters to see how God reacted to the pain of the people of Israel. Okay, I would like to quote some of the verses. If you read Exodus chapter 2, verses 24 and 25, God says that I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry. Okay, I know their suffering. Okay. So 3 Hebrew words are used here. One is Ra'ah, and the other one is Shama, and the other one is Yada. Ra'ah is to see, Shama is to hear, Shema, O Israel, you would have heard that, hear, O Israel, and then Yada, to know. These 3 words are purposely used by the narrator in order to make sure that God's presence is there in the midst of the suffering of the people of Israel. Here the writer is not presenting a God who is sitting somewhere, who is transcendent, who is not reachable, but these words are very clear for us to understand that God is observing, God knows, and God hears. You see the imagination. God hears, and God can understand, and God knows, God perceives. One of the fascinating meanings of this word Ra'ah is not only to see, but to observe, to perceive, but on top of that, to feel. So many interpreters, they say that God was able to feel the pain of the people of Israel. Okay, so let us decolonize, reimagine God as someone who is partaking with the pain of the people. God is not distancing himself. God is partaking with the suffering people. Okay, here it is more clear. So Yahweh, the God of Israel, identifies himself with the people of Israel. It was not that he saw from a distance, he came to know their suffering. It is not that. He was able to feel their suffering. And that's what these words are trying to say. So it is a call for us to feel, to be part of the people who are undergoing suffering and pain. The second theology, what we can create under the theology of pain, is that the suffering servant bears the pain of the entire creation, which is recorded in Isaiah chapter 52 and 53. If we see there, it is mentioned as the servant songs. There are so many servant songs in Isaiah chapters 40 to 55. And one of the servant songs presents the way how Jesus Christ was crucified. Actually, it was prophesied many, many years, many centuries before the time of Jesus Christ. So it can also be related to the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. One of the fascinating things that we can see here is that the servant who is suffering endured pain on himself. He is not associating himself with the people who are suffering, like the God of Israel, Yahweh, but he is enduring pain. Okay. Because it is written that God has taken our pain, our diseases, okay, because he is going to give us hope, and so on and so forth. So the servant who is mentioned in Isaiah is related to Jesus Christ, who has endured the suffering, the pain of the entire creation, not only human beings, because Apostle Paul says the entire creation is groaning. The next thing what we can see here is, in the New Testament, the suffering Messiah bore pain and offered embodied hope. If we see the trauma that Jesus has undergone in Gethsemane, with one of the initial aspects of his suffering before crucifixion, we can see that there was blood in his sweating. Okay, bloody sweat. It is interesting that the physician of the group, that is St. Luke, is the only one to mention this, what is happening to Jesus Christ. He says, and being in agony, he prayed the longer, and his sweat became as drops of blood trickling down upon the ground. It is a very rare thing, but I think medical practitioners are here. It is medically proven also, when a person is in stress, unbearable, that can happen. Jesus Christ has also experienced pain. So the Old Testament and New Testament are witness to us that we have a God who has undergone pain. We have a God who sided with the people who were suffering. We have a God who endured pain on himself. The next main theology that we should learn out of this theology of hope is that ecclesia, that is the body of Christ, the church, it is vulnerable yet interdependent. The body of Christ is called to share the pain. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, from verses 12 onwards, we can see that Paul is explaining what is in fact the church. Christ is the head, and we are different parts, different organs of the body of Christ. Some parts are weak, some parts are strong, some organs endure pain, some organs don't endure pain. But what he says is that when there is a pain, even in a minute organ, the entire body can feel the pain. So when organic unity has been mentioned here by Apostle Paul. Okay. It is very clear that we are united together. We are different organs or parts of the same body. So it clearly shows that we have to share the experiences of our friends who are undergoing pain, the co-believers who are undergoing pain. We are living in a selfish world. We are living in an individualistic world which don't talk about sharing others' pains. But here Paul is insisting that we are different parts of the same organ. If I am feeling pain, you will also feel pain. Because we are part and parcel of the same body of Christ. Okay. The Greek word which is used here is sympathos. Sympathos, meaning to feel together with. To feel together with. That means if I feel happy, the rest of the organs will feel happy. If one organ is suffering or enduring pain, the entire body will feel that. And that is what Apostle Paul is trying to say, that this is God's plan, that we should share the pain of others. And in what way we can bring out this theology of pain? We can also see that individual or communal laments can also become as a tool to overcome pain. If you read the book of Psalms, it's a very good medicine. There are many psychologists who say that psalmist is doing a sort of catharsis, pouring out his agony, pouring out his pain. He is not containing his pain within himself. He is pouring out so that he can feel relaxed. And that's what Jesus also did in the Gethsemane. This is one of the tools that pastors and theologians can use in order to enable people to endure pain or overcome pain. And finally, I would like to bring out a theology of hope, enduring pain and let it go. Enduring pain and let it go. There are so many examples in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament that how God brings hope in the context of uncertainty. How God encourages people in the context of chaos. One such example is from Ezekiel chapter 37, where we can see that the prophet was asked by God to speak to the dry bones. He didn't believe that it will happen, but God sent his spirit and revived the dry bones. So that shows that pain is not permanent, but pain cannot be avoided. Pain is inevitable, but at the same time, we can overcome or endure pain with the help of the Spirit of God. If we read Old Testament, the Hebrew word for hope is tikva. Tikva is nothing but looking with anticipation, expectation that something good will happen. But this word tikva comes from the basic verb kava. And this word has been used in several occasions, and especially this word means thread. That means minute small threads are joined together to make a big thread or a rope. And that is the meaning that this word kava is saying. So friends, it is not someone's pain, it is my pain. Let me be a channel in order to ease their pain, make them feel comfortable. So like small threads, we have to join together in order to fight against this pain, or to make people to undergo and understand that this is part and parcel of life, but God is there to endure them and help them to overcome. So there is a hope. It is not that everybody has to endure pain. Yes, there are chronic pains. There is no answer in the Bible. But only we have hope in God that one fine day this pain will go away. Let me conclude by reading few lines. Too often, Christian attitude towards pain is characterized by a detached academic appeal to God's sovereignty, as if pain were a game or math problem. Or we expect that since God is good, everything will just work out all right somehow. Our modern world has done much to elevate or avoid pain. We assume that pain must be controlled or it has to be removed, and willing to invest considerable resources to live our lives in a painless way as much as possible. Whereas pain can be readily seen as a social phenomenon. Pain is more often seen as individual, but from a Christian perspective, from what we have learned now, there must be a relational link between pain and love. Because when we view others in pain, we are called to reach out to them. Being present with somebody in pain is a great gift, even if words are not appropriate. Such love is under threat, however, since the link between pain and indifference may strengthen us as we become inured to it through a numbing individualism which cuts off from each other. According to one theologian, Thomas Reynolds, in his book Vulnerable Communion, he writes that we are all both vulnerable and interdependent. We are vulnerable because we are embodied and our bodies are fragile. We are independent because of that vulnerability. So we need each other. We belong to one community, though we are different. But the modern concept of self-sustaining autonomous individual or individualism is a myth. The existence of pain in our lives shows us our need of each other. Pain need not isolate us, but bring us together with empathy. What can fracture our relationships is the desire to find an explanation about why somebody is in pain. Our society has at its heart a concept of what it means to be normal. Of course, nobody attains that standard, since at any point in our lives we may become sick, or it may lead to chronic illness. We can become disabled, live with mental health and challenges. So how we can say that we can have a normal life? Nevertheless, the idea of normality is a socially generated benchmark by which we all are judged. Those who are in good health and able bodies have nothing to fear, but it can be used to find others wanting. To be in pain or live with a disability can be seen as a deficiency, and such a judgment can be easily transferred from the condition to the person themselves. We look forward to a world where pain and suffering will be more. Nancy Iceland, in her book The Disabled, pointed out that the risen Christ still had the wounds from the crucifixion in his body. When Thomas wanted to be sure that the person in front of him was Jesus, he was invited to put his hands into the wounds. And Jesus has undergone pain and says that pain and suffering will be there, but we can endure and overcome as a community. We need one another, we need the help of others, and the medical practitioners are trying to ease the pain from your perspective. The theologians and the pastors are trying to ease the pain from people from their perspectives. Let us join together and address this issue and help people who are finding it difficult to cope up with pain. Thank you so much for your attention.